who is universally loved, but actually an asshole. Not sure if they are universally loved, but I used to work in restaurants for the House of Mouse. And both Howie Mandel and Bobby McFerrin were total jerks. Acted like they were completely above everyone else, and both of them let their bratty kids run screaming around the restaurant. Always smart when people carrying hot trays of food are everywhere. I had a lot of positive celebrity interactions. But those two were awful. Can't stand to listen to. Don't worry. Be happy. Since Rachel Ray. Loved her show. Until I went to see her live. In between takes she was a very not nice person. John Stamos helped his friend rape someone and was still bragging about it decades later. I don't think he's famous enough to be universally loved, but Mitch Albom, aka the author of Tuesdays with Morrie, hosted him at an author event for a small venue, and he was fucking furious that the event was so beneath him. Was furious we didn't have a plate of fresh fruit for him. He didn't have a rider or anything demanding we have fruit at the ready. Just expected us to know. Was furious that more people didn't show up to fawn over him. Was just generally furious. Instead of talking about his book during the lecture, he spent 20 minutes taking a steaming dump over the staff, venue, and audience. Ironic given the subject of his books. Edit. The only person we shit-talked more was J.A. Jantz, who writes a handful of detective series and one inexplicable collection of poems she loved, doing events at our place, and was there every 6 months to promote her newest book. She had a huge and devoted following, which baffled me because her events are insane. She once spent an entire hour singing for the audience. Not well. When we tried to tell her we were now closing, she sort of waved grandly to her adoring fans and said, "Not until these people have heard me talk about my books," and then kept us open an additional hour while she mostly didn't talk about her book. She also always demanded we had copies of her poetry book on hand, despite the fact that no one wanted it and we could rarely even get copies from the publisher. Once we even wound up buying some from a discount bin at Costco just so we could technically have some on hand. Edit 2. It may have been a Walmart discount bin. It's been a minute. It's become public knowledge now. But Ellen DeGeneres, I met her briefly while working events at Universal Studios FL. Back in the mid-2000s, she would on occasion film her talk show on location at Universal. My job would call for me to interact with Ellen and her crew for prepping and crowd control measures. There were 2 occasions that raised an eyebrow. First was behind set. The show was getting ready to start and I went back to tell her crew that we were ready for her to make her way to the stage where her show was being recorded. When I walked back there, I saw Ellen yelling at a crew member inches from his face. She was belittling him and threatened to leave him in FL. Second occasion was brief but impactful. One of my co-workers was standing somewhat close to her, back to back with her. Ellen turned around, looked at her with a look of disbelief, and after a couple seconds said, "Aren't you just an invader of space?" She scoffed and walked away. We were both looking at each other thinking WTF is her problem. So for all those years I always thought of her as a phony while all of America loved her. I was not surprised when all those stories of her being awful to work with came to light. I already had experienced it. Martha Stewart. I witnessed her call her assistant a and I quote, "a worthless piece of shit." No one should be called that for accidentally dropping her handbag. Edit. I also offered Martha a bottle of Fiji water and she said she only drinks Voss. From personal experience, Bill Nye was an absolute asshole from my interaction with him. It was perhaps the saddest moment of don't meet your heroes in my life. Steve Jobs, it's pretty well known that he was a giant asshole. But he's still pretty romanticized in the tech sphere. Bill Nye. Everyone I've ever talked with who met him has terrible stories. H is just a grumpy and mean asshole. From what my fiancé told me is that Beyoncé is extremely entitled and rude to people. He worked in a restaurant where many celebrities would go to and he loved most of them but absolutely hated Beyoncé and Jay-Z. Steve Harvey. For those who want to know, watch his interviews on women and atheists. He's cheated on his wives. Physically abusive. ACTS like religion is the only thing that between him and killing and raping people. Ed and Lorraine Warren. I'm not talking about taking advantage of people in vulnerable states and exploiting fear and trying to get famous by proving the paranormal, but Ed kept a young girl in their house. IIRC. They told neighbors she was a fallen woman they were helping out by giving her a job as a live-in maid or nanny. She wasn't. She was a child and he was a predator and Lorraine did nothing about it, and yes, they had a kid in the house. Really sickened me to find out, cause I like the Conjuring series as horror films and just enjoyed them for being cookie ghost hunters. Boy was I wrong. Tim Allen lived near me for a while. Always a pompous ass, however. The gentleman who plays Gus Fring on Breaking Bad is a real good guy. Remembered my name and says hi to me when we run into each other at Whole Foods. He also tipped the cashier at WF $100 just because. Jimmy Savile was loved. Died. Found out he was a child predator. This question needs an "explain your answer" added to the end. Celebs I've had great interactions with, saw them being awesome. Jack Black. Trevor Noah. Weird Al. America Ferrer. Neil Gaiman. Tauheed Epps. 2 Chainz. Jenna Maury. Jenna Marbles. Michael Render. Killer Mike. Celebs I've had terrible interactions with, saw them being awful. Donald Trump. Pre-2016. He was a total jackass. He treated his wife like dirt and he talked to a black coworker of mine like he was his personal slave. Chris Pratt. Mocked a woman he was with for being clumsy for a really long time and made everybody uncomfortable. Also didn't tip his waiter. Michael Jordan. Asked management to get that ugly guy out of my sight. I don't want to look at his stupid fucking face. James Corden. Huge jackass and an unbearable drunk. Ruined more than a few people's evenings by just being an annoying prick. Joel Osteen. Was super smiley but extremely unfriendly and had the most unsettling vibe I've ever encountered. Amy Schumer. Very difficult guest who made a lot of demands. Didn't say please or thank you. Snapped her fingers at people to get their attention and was very loud. I worked at a certain hotel, casino, restaurant chain place that a lot of stars have stayed at. The first few you meet really blow you away and then after a while you're like, Andy Samberg is just picking his nose like nobody is watching. Huh. The only celebrities I actually met were America Ferrera and Joel Osteen. The rest of the people I mentioned I just saw my coworkers dealing with, second-hand accounts that were fun to listen to. Jordan Peele is a great tipper and generally just seems cool AF. Mike Trout is kind of a dumbass but not in a bad way. Emma Watson gets very sweaty very quickly but sticks it out like a fucking champ. Jason Bateman tries a little too hard to be funny when he's around other celebs. Shaquille O'Neal is pretty nice and a little weird but that's okay. He also made bubbles in a drink he was given by blowing into the straw. Absolutely nobody liked meeting Kevin Sorbo and the other celebs avoided him like the plague. Naomi Osaka is absolutely the most wonderful person ever and deserves an award for being so nice. All the time, no matter what. Lil Wayne is funny as hell and talks about football a lot. Kevin Feige is socially awkward. Mark Ruffalo is kind of a corny douchebag. And John Green acts like he thinks he's really nice but he's actually kind of an oblivious jerk. Handed his plate to a Latina woman at the function he was at but she wasn't working. Just another attendee. Worked on the behind the scenes of a Barbra Streisand album for a month and I've never seen a person treat regular folk so terribly. Ellen's fall from grace has been well-deserved and overdue. Edit. Just to clarify, she's not a comic book villain like Bezos or Dick Cheney. She's just an immature narcissist with zero tact or grasp on reality. There are plenty of good clips, compilations on YouTube that shows her wildly out-of-touch behavior. My personal least favorite is her singing to a sleeping baby in a drugstore through a megaphone as the horrified mother is in complete disbelief. India Bollywood actor, Salman Khan head to almost all his fans. He ran a campaign called Being Human, that was just presenting him as a good person who cares about poor and needy. Actually, it was just a publicity stunt for his few criminal cases like killing innocent people while drunk, driving and killing endangered animals. His fans see him as a role model but the campaign was just to get him a clean chit from those criminal cases. After all the criminal charges were taken away from him, there is no being human is happening. Adding to that, he ruined a lot of upcoming actors, singers and other performers' professional life in Bollywood because he didn't like them more. According to him, they insulted him one and another way. His personal life is also shady. All of his girlfriends ended up relationship because of his personality, possessiveness and sadistic behavior. He is promoting nepotism in the film industry and as I discussed before he ruined lot of people's lives. Sorry to let everyone down. I've got my suspicions about Steve Harvey. Kevin Spacey was until it all finally came out. David Dobrik is probably one of the most tragic ones, not only cause he's a piece of shit but because even if he was a great person, it's depressing that people even care about that content and actually watch that. Plus, indeed, he's a piece of shit abusive sociopath. Oprah. Joss Whedon, I idolized the guy for Buffy, Angel, Firefly, Cabin in the Woods, and so on. Then the shady stuff that went on behind the scenes came to light. Between the awful charisma Carpenter was treated before she was basically run off the show, and how they needed a rule on set that he wasn't allowed to be alone in a room with Michelle Trachtenberg, who was underage at the time. I lost pretty much all respect for him as a person. From the shit that I've heard. Apparently Nicolas Cage and Jared Leto, meanwhile. Apparently Alan Tudyk, Brendan Fraser, and Nathan Fillion are the nicest people. Edit. Yal blew up my phone last night. How the hell did this get 3.1 Kelvins upvotes? Dr. Phil. He takes advantage of mentally ill people for money. Edit. He isn't universally loved, but he is very successful and is good at hiding his dark side. Chevy Chase. He is known to treat his co-workers like crap and has thrown out some racial slurs. Wilson. The way he just floated away at the end like their friendship meant nothing. What a dick. Before it became public knowledge, I always had to tell people what an asshole Bill Cosby was 20+ years ago.